In this video, I'm going to look at the biggest chokes by every NFL team. Nobody is safe from my wrath. Now prepare your anuses. Arizona Cardinals 2015 NFC Championship game. Arizona doesn't really have any major chokes, so I went with this ass whooping they took at the hands of a really good Panthers team in the 2015 NFC Championship game led by MVP Cam Newton. Carolina was favored to win, but I don't think even the biggest Panthers fan saw Arizona completely melting down to lose by 34 points after they arguably looked like the best team in the league all season. Atlanta Falcons, Super Bowl 51. We're getting this one out of the way early, thankfully. There's nothing I can say that you already don't know. Atlanta took a seemingly insurmountable 28-3 lead with 1.5 quarters left. Then an onslaught of incompetence on Atlanta's part, mixed with a ton of Tom Brady's devil magic, hello Edelman catch, resulted in Atlanta losing 34-28 in overtime. In my opinion, it's the biggest choke in sports history. No offense to Latrell Sprewell. Baltimore Ravens 2019 divisional round. I almost went with the 2011 AFC Championship game here because of the Lee Evans drop and Billy Cundiff shank, but it's hard to find a bigger meltdown for Baltimore than this. They finished 2019 with the best record in the league, and Lamar Jackson won MVP. All for it to go up in smoke in an embarrassing 28-12 home loss to Tennessee in the divisional round. They were favored by 10 points, and if not for a garbage time touchdown, easily could have lost by 20. Yikes. Buffalo Bills, Super Bowl 25. The Bills came into Super Bowl 25 as 6.5-point favorites. They were going up against a backup quarterback and had just won the AFC Championship game by 48 points. It was almost a certainty they were going to win a ring until it wasn't. They blew a 12-3 lead in the first half and a 19-17 lead in the fourth quarter. Of course, everybody remembers the ending with Scott Norwood shanking a game-winning 47-yard field goal. And to think, this was by far Buffalo's best Super Bowl appearance. Tough scene. Carolina Panthers 2008 divisional round. Otherwise known as the game Jake Delhomme's career died. The 2008 Panthers finished a surprising 12-4 thanks to a deadly running game and timely contributions in the passing game. That didn't carry over to the playoffs, where Carolina was 10-point favorites over an upstart Arizona team in the divisional round. Unfortunately, Delhomme completely melted down, throwing 5 interceptions while the defense couldn't stop Larry Fitzgerald in a brutal 20-point home loss. Chicago Bears 1986 divisional round. The Bears went 14-2 in 1986, continuing their dominance off of winning a Super Bowl. However, starting quarterback Jim McMahon wasn't available for the playoffs this time, so Mike Ditka decided to make tiny Doug Flutie the starter going into their playoff game versus Washington. It was not well received. Chicago, despite being 7-point favorites, lost by 14 points at home. Flutie was awful, and Chicago committed 4 turnovers. Cincinnati Bengals, Super Bowl 56. This one might surprise some people considering it's so recent, but it's incredible how many chances Cincinnati blew to win this game in the second half. Up 17-13, they got an interception to get great field position, but settled for a field goal instead of a touchdown. They then had 4 drives up 20-16, but got 0 points out of them. LA finally went ahead 23-20 with a minute and a half left, but Cincy's last drive stalled out at midfield, not even getting a field goal. They should have won this game comfortably. Cleveland Browns 1986 AFC Championship game. Cleveland is known for its long list of heartbreaking playoff defeats, but to me, nothing tops losing the 86 AFC Championship game at home, in large part thanks to the drive. You know the story by now. Cleveland had a 20-13 lead with 5 minutes left before John Elway drove Denver 98 yards to tie and send the game into overtime. Cleveland got the ball but did nothing with it before Elway once again drove Denver into field goal range, where they made the game-winning kick to win 23-20. One defensive stop away from the Super Bowl. Shame. Dallas Cowboys 2007 divisional round. Dallas has had so many hilarious playoff collapses, it's hard to pick just one, but I went with 2007. Dallas was 7-point home favorites over an upstart New York Giants team, who Dallas had beaten twice in the regular season on their way to a 13-3 record. Dallas had 13 Pro Bowlers and looked destined to reach the Super Bowl, but their elite offense went scoreless on their last 4 drives, including 3 while trailing 21-17. The game ended on a desperation Romo interception in the end zone. Such a shame. Denver Broncos 1996 divisional round. It was either the Raheem Moore game in 2012 or this, and I decided to go old school. Denver was favored by 12.5 points over the expansion Jaguars. They jumped out to a 12-0 lead before Jacksonville reeled off 23 straight points. Denver cut the lead to 23-20 in the fourth, but Jacksonville answered with a touchdown to go up 10 with 4 minutes left. Elway threw another touchdown to make it 30-27, but Denver's onside kick failed and Jacksonville won. This was the only game Elway would lose at home over his last 3 seasons. Detroit Lions 2014 wildcard round. Detroit rarely makes the playoffs, and when they do, they're never favored to win, so it was tough to find a game, but I managed to do it because I'm a fucking hero. In 2014, 2015 versus Dallas, they had a 13-point lead midway through the third quarter, but went scoreless on each of their last 4 drives, which includes the famous controversial defensive pass interference flag pickup on a Stafford throw to Brandon Pettigrew. Regardless, Detroit had many chances to put this game away and failed. Simply put, they choked. Green Bay Packers 2014 NFC Championship game. I speak for Packers fans everywhere that even amongst the many postseason heartbreaks, the 2014 NFC Championship game still stands out well above the rest. Green Bay's defense forced 5 turnovers, many deep in Seattle territory, but Green Bay's high-powered offense led by MVP Aaron Rodgers couldn't capitalize with touchdowns. Green Bay had a 12-point lead with 4 minutes left before Seattle reeled off 15 unanswered points, thanks in large part to a botched onside kick by Brandon Bostic. Green Bay would tie it to send it into overtime before losing the coin toss and watching Russell Wilson throw the game-winning touchdown. Houston Texans 2019 divisional round. Houston didn't make the playoffs until 2011, and whenever they've lost, it's mostly been expected. So I went with the 2019 divisional round where they had a 24-0 lead early on Kansas City before being outscored 51-7 the rest of the way. KC was favored to win, but I think everybody watching had serious doubts once they went down 24. But Patrick Mahomes went Super Saiyan and the rest was history. This was the last playoff game family-friendly quarterback Deshaun Watson played for Houston. Indianapolis/Baltimore Colts Super Bowl III. The Peyton Manning era in Indy saw many playoff disappointments, but none topped the Baltimore Colts losing to the Jets in Super Bowl III as 18-point favorites. Baltimore finished the year 13-1 and had outscored opponents by 18.4 points per game on average. They had the league MVP in Earl Morrall, and nobody thought the lowly Jets of the AFL would win. Well, the Colts committed 5 turnovers while New York played safe and steady ball led by famous sex haver Joe Namath to win 16-7. Jacksonville Jaguars 1999 AFC Championship game. The 1999 Jags went 14-2 and had just won a playoff game by 55 points heading into the 1999 AFC Championship game. They were favored by 7 points over Tennessee, who was ironically the only team to beat them that season. It started out great, with Jacksonville having a 14-7 lead late in the first half before Tennessee took over. Jacksonville committed 6 turnovers, and Tennessee scored the last 26 points of the game to win handily 33-14. Yes, the 1999 Jags went 0-3 against Tennessee and 15-0 against the rest of the league. Kansas City Chiefs 2021 AFC Championship game. Throw out any KC playoff loss before 2018. That was pre-Mahomes. Throw out 2018 because KC's defense lost them the game, which wasn't surprising. The blowout loss in Super Bowl 55 was pretty explainable due to all the injuries. But the 2021 AFC Championship game versus Cincinnati, inexcusable. Mahomes threw 3 first-half touchdowns to give KC a 21-3 lead. A Mahomes team isn't supposed to lose a lead like that, especially at home. But then, Mahomes inexplicably turned into the worst player on the field in the second half. Cincy took advantage of his mistakes and won 27-24 in overtime. This is the biggest KC choke ever because the one player who was supposed to save the franchise cost them a golden opportunity to win another Super Bowl. Las Vegas Raiders 1985 divisional round. The 1985 Raiders went 12-4 and had NFL MVP Marcus Allen at his peak. They were a supposed lock to at least make the AFC Championship game, but the underdog Pats had different ideas. LA was favored by 5.5 points, but New England shocked the world with a 27-20 win, in large part thanks to controlling the time of possession with a deadly ground game and LA committing 6 turnovers, including a fumble recovered in the end zone by the Patriots for a touchdown that ended up being the deciding points. Los Angeles/San Diego Chargers 2006 divisional round. San Diego was the best team in football in 2006 and had the MVP LaDainian Tomlinson. But guess what? None of that fucking mattered in their divisional round matchup versus New England. San Diego couldn't take advantage of 3 bad quarters of play by Tom Brady, shocker, and had just an 8-point lead with 6 minutes left when Brady threw an interception that got fumbled back to New England, of course. New England would score a touchdown and 2-point conversion to tie the game, then eventually took a 24-21 lead with a minute left. Phillip Rivers drove San Diego into field goal range, but Nate Keating missed the kick to seal the loss. The Los Angeles/St. Louis Rams Super Bowl 36. Before Super Bowl 36, Rams wide receiver Ricky Proehl said a dynasty would be born that night, and he was right, just in a terrible, horrible, unexpected way. The greatest show on turf Rams came into Super Bowl 36 with a 14-2 record, the best offense in the league, and the MVP in Kurt Warner against a cute underdog story in New England. They were 14-point favorites, but for 3 quarters they could only muster 3 points and committed a pick 6. They eventually tied the game at 17 with a minute and a half left, but Tom Brady did his trademark dinking and dunking to set up Adam Vinatieri for the game-winning 48-yard field goal as time expired. This loss set the Rams franchise back for a decade and a half. Miami Dolphins 1985 AFC Championship game. In early January 1985, 1986, it was a virtual guarantee that Dan Marino would reach multiple Super Bowls, and a year after losing Super Bowl 19, he looked poised to meet those expectations, leading Miami back to the AFC Championship game at home against the Patriots, who had just upset the Raiders the week before. Miami was favored by 5.5 points to reach Super Bowl 20 for a rematch with the Bears, but they forgot to show up for the AFC Championship game. They committed 6 turnovers and allowed New England to run for 255 yards. New England controlled the ball for almost 40 minutes in a comfortable 31-14 win. Miami would miss the playoffs 4 straight years afterward. Minnesota Vikings 1998 NFC Championship game. The 1998 Vikings went 15-1, broke the single-season record for points, and were 11-point favorites heading into the 1998 NFC Championship game against the Falcons. Minnesota was in control for the entire game and had a 7-point lead and a chip shot field goal attempt with 2 minutes left to go up 10 and virtually end the game. But All-Pro kicker Gary Anderson, who hadn't missed a kick all season, wouldn't you know it, missed the kick. Atlanta took advantage and tied the game with a touchdown to send the game into overtime. Minnesota got 2 chances in overtime to win, but punted both times before Atlanta kicked the game-winning field goal to win 30-27. Imagine that. The Falcons were the clutch team. Crazy. New England Patriots, Super Bowl 42. You know the story by now. The 2007 Patriots destroyed the league, going 16-0, winning by almost 20 points per game. They slowed down a bit as the season went on, but managed to get to 18-0 and be 12.5-point favorites heading into the Super Bowl against the Giants. Needing just one more win to become immortal, New England's record-breaking offense, led by government loan acceptor Tom Dilfer, flopped, putting up just 14 points, and yet it still took some ridiculous plays on New York's final drive to take New England down. After a go-ahead touchdown pass from Eli Manning to famously responsible gun owner Plexico Burress with 35 seconds left, several desperation heaves from Brady fell incomplete, and New York officially sealed the 17-14 upset win. Thank God. New Orleans Saints 2020 divisional round. The Saints have had several famous playoff chokes in recent history, but to me, the worst of the bunch was the 2020 divisional round loss to Tampa. New Orleans' defense shut down the powerful Bucs offense all game long. All Drew Brees had to do was not shit his pants, and New Orleans would have won comfortably. But guess what? Brees shit his pants, throwing 3 interceptions, which helped set up Tom Trubisky with several short fields for touchdowns. And who can forget the back-breaking Jared Cook fumble as New Orleans was driving up 7 points late in the third quarter. This game was another prime example of Tom Brady's devil luck that has made the league a worse place for 2 decades. Eat Arby's. New York Giants 2008 divisional round. In 2008, the Giants went 12-4, fresh off of a legendary Super Bowl win, and looked poised to repeat as champs until Plexico Burress cheddar bobbed himself late in the season. Nevertheless, New York earned the 1 seed in the NFC and had to take on hated rival Philadelphia in the divisional round. Like most things Eli Manning, he was either really good or really bad in the playoffs. And unfortunately for New York, on this day, he was really bad. The Giants were 4-point favorites, but they committed 3 turnovers and missed 2 makeable field goals in an embarrassing 23-11 home loss. On behalf of Eagles fans everywhere, thank you, Eli. New York Jets 1986 divisional round. The Jets have almost never been expected to win big games, so they don't have many playoff chokes, but the Marathon by the Lake might be the exception. They were still 7-point underdogs going into this game, but they played surprisingly well. They had Cleveland deep in their own territory, well behind the sticks, with a 10-point lead with 3.5 minutes left to play when Mark Gastineau made a terrible play, spearing Bernie Kosar. This gave Cleveland a new set of downs and, more importantly, new life. They reeled off 10 straight points to send the game into overtime. After a scoreless overtime, thanks to some brutal missed field goals, Cleveland finally won in double overtime on a field goal. Philadelphia Eagles, Super Bowl 39. I am well versed in playoff disappointment as an Eagles fan, but I ultimately went with Super Bowl 39 here because it was an extremely winnable game on the biggest stage. Philly committed 4 turnovers, 3 of which came in New England territory to halt great scoring opportunities. This allowed New England to get away with being asleep on offense for almost the entire first half. It's shocking, I know, that Tom Brady would get away with playing like ass for an entire half in the Super Bowl. It was a 14-14 game heading into the fourth, but the Philly defense was no match for Brady's breathtaking screen passes. New England reeled off 10 straight points to take a commanding lead. Philly added a late touchdown that ended up being meaningless in a frustrating 24-21 loss. Thank God for Nick Foles. Pittsburgh Steelers 2001 AFC Championship game. Arguably, no team was hurt more from the Patriots dynasty than the Steelers, and it all began in the 2001 AFC Championship game. Pittsburgh came into the game as 10-point home favorites, but things quickly turned dire. Despite Tom Brady leaving the game in the second quarter due to an ankle injury, Pittsburgh fell behind 21-3 midway through the third, thanks in large part to 2 special teams touchdowns by New England. Pittsburgh eventually got it to 21-17 heading into the fourth, but Cordell Stewart, who committed 4 turnovers on the day, threw 2 back-breaking interceptions in New England territory to seal the 24-17 win for New England. excellent. San Francisco 49ers, Super Bowl 54. San Francisco came out of nowhere in 2019 to finish 13-3 and win the NFC in dominating fashion. Despite this, they were actually 1.5-point underdogs heading into Super Bowl 54, but that won't make any 49ers fans any less butthurt over how they choked this game away. San Fran had a 10-point fourth quarter lead, and on their 4 drives in the final period, they scored 0 points and ended up losing 31-20. Perhaps the 49ers players were distracted by Jimmy Garoppolo's beauty, but if they had made just 1 or 2 more plays offensively, like hitting an open Emmanuel Sanders for a touchdown, they would have won the Lombardi. Seattle Seahawks, Super Bowl 49. We all know about the Malcolm Butler interception that lost Seattle a second straight title and gave Tom Brady his 4th ring, but Seattle's choke goes deeper than just 1 play. They had 2 drives with a 24-14 lead late in the 3rd and early in the 4th quarter, but went scoreless on both. This included a crucial 3rd down drop deep in New England territory by Jermaine Kearse. Seattle then had the ball up 24-21 in the 4th and of course went 3 and out. Then there was the famous final drive, which saw Kearse make a play nobody thought would be topped, only for it to be topped 2 plays later by Butler's interception. If Seattle had just run the ball with Lynch on the 1-yard line, they win. The franchise still hasn't recovered from this loss. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 1999 NFC Championship game. I almost went with Tampa's loss to LA this year to piss off Brady fans, but I decided not to. Instead, I chose the 99 NFC Championship game. St. Louis entered the game as 14-point favorites over Tampa, so how can this be a choke on Tampa's part? Well, the fact that their offense wasted a generational defensive performance against the greatest show on turf. Tampa's D held the potent Rams offense to just 9 points on 10 possessions, but it was all for naught as Tampa's offense generated just 6 points on 11 drives. This game was famous for creating the Burt Emanuel rule, after the Tampa wide receiver had an apparent catch late in the game overturned. Could the outcome have been different if that catch had rightfully stood? We'll never know. I doubt it though. Tennessee Titans 1992 wildcard round. Back in the day, the Houston Oilers were famous for being extremely talented postseason chokers, and no postseason defeat of theirs exemplified that more than the 1992 wildcard game versus Buffalo. Buffalo was without star quarterback and future Hall of Famer Jim Kelly and had to settle for Frank Reich under center. Things went as you'd expect for about 2.5 quarters. Houston took a commanding 35-3 lead after a pick 6 to start the 3rd, but then Buffalo exploded, no offense to Alderaan, for 35 unanswered points to take a 38-35 lead. Houston would tie the game at 38 to send it into overtime. But in overtime, Warren Moon threw an interception to set up Buffalo for a game-winning field goal, which they made to seal the 41-38 win. Washington, Super Bowl 18. Believe it or not, Washington was once an elite NFL franchise, and in 1983, they were fresh off of a Super Bowl win. They dominated offensively, finishing 14-2 thanks to their record-setting offense. They barely squeaked by San Fran in the NFC Championship game to reach Super Bowl 18 against the Raiders, and they entered the game as 2-point favorites, but things very quickly went south for them. LA scored on a fumble recovery in the end zone and had a crucial pick 6 just before halftime to take a 21-3 lead. Washington cut it 21-9, but then Marcus Allen took over, scoring back-to-back touchdowns. Washington ended up losing by 29 points in what was the most unexpected Super Bowl blowout until the Broncos got stomped by the Seahawks 30 years later in Super Bowl 48.